Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this edition of Inside Pitch with me, Joe Mansolino, and my co-host slash producer slash do it everything, Mr. Brian Lehman. Brian, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I brought the knife with me tonight so we could slash everything up.
There you go. There you go. We're going to have a good show for you guys tonight. Our guest this evening is Mr. Leigh Steinberg, the super agent of all time. Just a true class act, a great guy. Hopefully you learn a lot about him. Hopefully you buy his book, Leigh Steinberg's book, The Agent, My 40-Year Career Making Deals and Changing the Game. Just a great guy. We'll get to him in a minute. How's things been going with you? What do you think of these races?
You know, I try to stay out of the middle of those debates because, 3 or 4 teams really are biting the hind one, and then you have a few that are just blowing everybody away. Yeah. So I just sit back and pop my adult beverage and watch them go.
You got to watch those biters, I guess. You got to watch those biters.
Well, typically what you pop them on top of the head and they quit.
And on that note, let's talk about what's going on. In the National League East, the Atlanta Braves are leading their division, followed very closely by actually the Phillies, the Nats, and the Mets are all getting fairly close together. And then that MIA, the Marlins, are pulling up the rear in that division. I guess that's one of the biters that you're referring to?
I think so. That's one of those where are they now questions that'll come up later.
Okay.
Of course, we could talk about the Rays. That's about to happen with them, too.
Oh, I don't know. They're still playing pretty good.
No, I'm talking about moving to Canada.
Okay. In the National League East, the Cubs and the Milwaukee Brewers are fighting for first, and very close behind is the St. Louis Cardinals. And then the Cincinnati Reds and the Pittsburgh Pirates are all right there too. So all of those teams are in the running. They're all fairly close, within 5-6 games for each other from first to last. I mean, that's a pretty good race right now. Very exciting to watch.
I just can't control myself. The more you talk about this, I'm tingly.
Okay, well, let's keep those tingles going, and we'll talk about the National League West, where the Dodgers are out in front with a comfortable lead.
When I was talking about those biters, I'm starting to see some. Look at the Rockies and the Diamondbacks and the Padres. Oh, good grief, and the Giants.
Rockies, Diamondbacks, and Padres are all fighting for second place. They're going to be second, third, and fourth, but they're all fighting right there. They're all pretty close together. And I guess your biter example would be the San Francisco Giants trailing the division. Is that what you're saying?
Yep, just thump them on the head, they'll quit.
Okay. All right. Well, and the Dodgers, as we said, are in first place in that division, and last week they had a very interesting scenario where for the first time in baseball history, they won 3 games in a row, back to back to back, with walk-off home runs. Matt Beatty did it, and then Alex Verdugo and Will Smith. 3 games with walk-off home runs to end the game. Never been done in Major League Baseball history.
Will Smith, he's a busy guy. First he's doing movies, now he's doing baseball. You just never know with that guy.
When you're a genie, you can make things happen.
I've been looking for a genie. She has the nice brown hair.
I'll bet you dreamed of Jeannie.
I did. And we'll stop on that one.
And let's go to the American League, where the Yankees are in first place in their division, followed by the Tampa Rays, who are playing pretty well. Tampa Bay Rays are looking pretty good, actually. Having a good season so far. Boston Red Sox are right behind them, followed by the Toronto Blue Jays.
Right behind them. Right.
And I guess what you would say is trailing the pack, and therefore a biter, if you will, the Baltimore Orioles.
I guess the Blue Jays would be more like nibblers, and the Orioles would be biters.
Wow. But something great happened in Toronto also last week. A very cool thing. Albert Pujols, who will no doubt be a Hall of Famer, He's making history almost every game he plays with something that he's doing. But last week, in a very, very class act in Toronto, while the Angels were on the road, he saw a young fan trying to get his attention out in the right field corner who had Down syndrome. And he was holding up a pen, wearing an Albert Pujols jersey. And Albert went over there as he was approaching the kid. He started taking off his own jersey, did that, signed his jersey, and signed the young man's jersey, lifted the kid up, put him on his shoulders, and just posed for the pictures and made that kid memory of a lifetime for him and his family that was there with him. Just a true class act thing to do.
No kidding.
That was very, very impressive.
Matter of fact, that is blowing up on Facebook and on YouTube. You're seeing it everywhere, and that's non-fans are pushing it, which is a wonderful thing for the sport and for the guy and for the family, really, because that's so
absolutely
nice.
You know, and sports needs that. You know, we do have Leigh Steinberg on today, and you'll see what a great job he does in the community, making sure that the athletes that he signs is willing to give in the community, and just something that simple by Albert Pujols will make so many people who witness that, even when you watch it, like you said, on Facebook or YouTube, people will never forget that that's what he did. You know, I mean, he has put a mark on that family and that young man in particular forever. You know, he has a fan for life, and just out of the goodness of his heart. You know, that was very, very impressive. I was very proud of him that he was able to do that.
Good point. And, you know, the funny thing is, the fans that are going out to the ballparks or whatnot probably see more of that than we realize. Not quite to that degree. But, you know, you see the players and whatnot throwing the balls up into the stadium or the seats for the kids and trying to make sure if a little kid wants to take part or take pictures, that they get their pictures taken. So, you know, that's really, really great of the kids, I mean the players, to put themselves out there to do things like that.
You know, and that really is a good point, because you do see that on almost every inning when there's the third out, whichever player ends up with that ball will almost always toss it into the stands. You know, be it the outfield, wherever they are, they'll throw that ball into the stands. Usually to a youngster. But what a great thing to do. You know, I don't remember that being a consistent thing when I was going to games or playing in games or anything. But, I mean, just to watch what they do so easily and you know, not even thinking about it, just knowing that, you know, I'm going to make somebody happy. And you see it in the minor leagues too now.
Yep. Matter of fact, the game you and I went to a few weeks ago, you know, the players went out of their way, again, to make sure that they were including the fans all over the field as giving them their money's worth, letting them know that they were appreciative of their presence there.
Yeah, that is the Pensacola Blue Wahoos, and they, like we've talked about, they're just very impressive to watch, baseball-wise, with all the fundamentals and how they play, treating the fans with respect, but getting involved with the fans. Like a lot of minor league teams do that, but just the way these kids are doing it is just really fun to watch. It's fun to support the team,
especially when you're out there watching a bunch of guys 5'5" tall out there doing all this stuff. It's awesome. You know, you see a guy show up out there that's 5'11", you're like, it's a giant. Okay, I'm gonna get dirty letters. I admit it.
Hey, you know, it is what it is.
One of which will come from the pitcher.
Albert Pujols, we want to thank you for that, especially for that being on the road. You know, that just made it even more impressive. And, you know, you've got a lot of Toronto Blue Jays fans that'll now be Albert Pujols fans for life. Very, very impressive. A lot of you players out there, that's something you need to really start doing, is pay attention to the fans. Don't let it just be the minor leaguers. I mean, really give back to the community with something as simple as that. Let's get back to the American League Central Division.
Wait a minute, one last point before we move on.
You go right ahead.
If those guys really, really want to get the fans to stop dressing up as empty seats and show up, that's the best way to do it. Make sure that they just keep giving back a little bit. Because, you know, the unfortunate thing is people think in all sports of the players being a little spoiled children, and some guys are, I know, and some women. But for the most part, they do want to find ways to give back. So if they keep doing that, that'll help bring folks back to the stadium, and that's a beautiful thing because all levels of sport need that.
Well, and I think that's true. And in baseball, both minor leagues and major leagues, fans do need to realize that once the game's actually started, don't yell for an autograph and those kind of things because it's not going to happen and it shouldn't happen.
One more point, though. To the fans that sit out in the field yelling at the players, that's cool. Yell all the way. That's all fun and games. But for the love of God, try to be funny. Don't try to get past stupidity.
Yeah, and you see that a lot in sports where somebody will just heckle these guys and call them by name and say things that are not appropriate and have fun. You know, we've talked before this season on the show about cheer for your team. You know, don't boo the other team. Don't rag somebody. Just cheer for your team.
I think he's talking about me.
That's a great point. That's a really good point, and we need to do more of that. But you know, when you at any game, but it's particularly minor leagues, but even in the at the major league level, get there early. You know, watch batting practice. You want balls? That's where you know you can get a ball from somebody and have them come over and sign. You know, in the major leagues, when it's done, they're gone. They're off the field. They're done. In the minor leagues, they'll stay and sign afterwards. But always before the game, somebody is willing to do that. So get there early. Enjoy watching batting practice. Enjoy watching the players work out, jog, stretch, throw, all those kind of things. Be a fan. Learn to love the game.
Yeah, matter of fact, and at some degree, you might actually get to know them. Because some of the guys, they like talking to the fans. You can see them. They'll walk up and just start chatting away.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a pretty young lady.
Well, let's go to the American League Central, where the Minnesota Twins are in first place, followed by the Cleveland Indians and the Chicago White Sox. And then battling for that fourth spot is the Detroit Tigers and the Kansas City Royals. And in the American League West, where the Houston Astros are in first, followed by the Texas Rangers, the Oakland A's, and then the Los Angeles Angels and the Seattle Mariners pulling up the rear, and I guess you would say
ankle biters.
The biters.
Sometimes it just hits me funny. At least we didn't call them. Never mind. We'll just keep going. We'll say that till after the show. Those I don't know. Look, he's speechless. Look, Mom, we made Joe speechless.
My mom would never have believed it. That'll probably never happen.
Now for those folks at home wondering, what is going on? This is the stage where we're sitting there going, you know, we had more to say, but all of a sudden we lost it because I told one bad joke too many. And now all of a sudden it's stuck in both our heads collectively. Biters.
I just don't know. There's a lot of good races out there.
Aren't we going to another game soon?
We are. Wednesday. Tonight.
That's it. See, all you folks are sitting there right now going, how are they doing that? They're broadcasting, but they're going to a game. It's magic.
We will be there watching those Blue Wahoos play. Getting there early.
We're going to heckle the hecklers. Matter of fact, Here's your challenge. Nah, too late. Nope. The next time we go to the game, if we can get 10 people at the game to somehow or another get a hold of us, and they can call the number that we have, but if they can get a hold of us and let us know they're there, we'll buy those 10 people some form of drink. If they're an adult and they want an adult beverage, I'll buy you an adult beverage. But if you're less than 21, then we'll buy you a Coca-Cola or some other type drink. That way you can feel my pain with why I have to drink that type of stuff. And on that note, we'll just go ahead and...
Thanks for sharing.
Well, but I think that'd be a good thing. We'll say the first 10. We'll buy you something to drink. And you can buy us something to eat. By the end of the game, we ought to be fat as...
Wow. Well, a lot of you have questions that you want to talk about, and we'll read some that have been turned in last week by a regular listener. Mr. David Nettles has some questions for us. But when you have things you want us to talk about, when you see on Facebook who we're going to have on the show, and you have questions you'd like to have asked of those guests, just be sure to write us at myinsidepitch@gmail.com. No spaces, myinsidepitch@gmail.com, and we will either read your questions and discuss it, or we will ask the people that we have on, our guests, what your questions are. So remember that at myinsidepitch@gmail.com.
He's so good at doing that, just letting everybody know how to get a hold of us. You know, if you don't know our email address, shame on you. That'd be myinsidepitch@gmail.com.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will. And our guest this evening is Leigh Steinberg, a super agent, one of the best ever.
A super guy.
A super guy. Forbes magazine has called him the greatest sports agent in history, and I believe it. He spent his childhood in the same city that I did in Southern California, Culver City, California. We both lived off of Culver Boulevard, in between Sawtelle and Inglewood Boulevards. We both attended at some time in our life Stoner Elementary School.
I wonder if that was just like foreshadowing.
That was kindergarten, elementary school. It was a great school to be at. Lots of great athletes actually ended up going there and went on to have success in Major League Baseball. But we will have Leigh on. Leigh is a great guy. Lots of famous athletes that he's represented. Let's get him on the line.
There you go.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have our guest, Mr. Leigh Steinberg. Let me tell you a little bit about Leigh before we talk to him. He's represented the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft an unprecedented 8 times, and has had over 60 total first-round draft picks. He's negotiated over $3 billion in contracts for players and athletes such as Troy Aikman, Steve Young, Warren Moon, June Jones, Ricky Williams, Ben Roethlisberger, Jeff George, Thurman Thomas, Drew Bledsoe, Howie Long, Jim Harbaugh, Patrick Mahomes, Oscar De La Hoya, and Lennox Lewis. One of my favorite things about him, he won't take a client unless they're willing to give back to the community, and his clients have donated over $600 million. He wrote this book, The Agent, My 40-Year Career Making Deals and Changing the Game. It was published in 2014. Please be sure, and we'll talk about where you can get that book after the show. But our guest, the wonderful Mr. Leigh Steinberg. Leigh, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for being on. How have you been? A lot of things going on in sports with you today?
Yeah, well, last night I went to the California Sports Hall of Fame banquet, and they inducted a really august class. To show you that California needs some more athletes, I was inducted a couple years ago.
I remember
but this
that. That was well-deserved, by the way.
This was Barry Bonds and Jerry Buss posthumously, and Marcus Johnson, and actually Fred Rogan, and Jim Gray, and Todd Christensen. So it was a great group, but right now is fortunately a little bit of a lull time because the players are all signed in football and they won't go to camp for another month, so living is a little easier.
Easy living is always a good thing. Always a good thing. You know, in your career, you've had lots of great athletes. You've had them in all different sports. Let's go first to when you first became a lawyer and you started working with a friend of yours, Mr. Steve Bartkowski, who was the number 1 pick in 1975. Why don't you talk a little bit about your transition from attorney to agent?
So you still continue to be an attorney, Joe, but I went to law school at Berkeley, and while I was there, I was a dorm counselor working my way through law school. And the freshman football team moved into the dorm, and one of the students was quarterback Steve Bartkowski. So I graduated from law school, and I was probably going to work for the district attorney because I wanted to go to court or maybe in corporate litigation. But before that ever happened, I had traveled the world for a year and ended up back in early 1975, and Steve Bartkowski then became the first player picked overall in the NFL draft. And he asked me to represent him. Well, there I was, brimming with legal experience, and they really didn't have sports agency then. There was nothing to aspire to. I mean, there were a few people around, but a team could simply, in a sport like football, hang up the phone and say, we don't deal with agents. So it was very rudimentary. The economics were very different, but we got the largest contract in the history of the NFL, and we flew into Atlanta. So my dad had raised me with two core values. One was treasure relationships, especially family, and the second was to try to make a meaningful difference in the world. Well, when we arrived there and there were Klieg lights flashing in the sky like for a movie premiere, a huge crowd pressed up against the police line, and the first thing we hear is, we interrupt the Johnny Carson show to bring you a special news bulletin. Steve Bartkowski and his attorney have just arrived at the Atlanta airport. We switch you live. Wow. I realized the veneration and idol worship that athletes were held in the country. And so I saw a chance for athletes to serve as role models and retrace their roots to the high school, collegiate, and professional community, and also to message, and realized this was a way to fulfill the ability to make a difference in the world. And so that was 1975, and 45 years have passed.
That's amazing. And you know, just that fact that thanks to your father, you are so willing, and you've worked your whole life on giving back to the community and having your clients do it. And like I said, that they have donated over $600 million. I mean, that's a huge impact to the world. So on behalf of all of us in this world, thank you for that.
Well, so many people do great things, but really, if you think about it, Joe, at the end of life, what are we left with? We're left with the relationships we had. Were you a good father? Were you a good son? Were you a good brother? Were you good with your friends? Were you there for them in a time of crisis? And then whatever you've done to make a difference and help people who can't help themselves. And really, at the end, newspaper clippings fade, material things fade, and that's what you're left with.
Boy, that's for sure. That's for sure. And you have been able to get so many quality athletes on your side to have you represent them. Were there any who balked a little bit about giving back to the community, or was everybody right on board and thought this is a great thing?
No, I once had a running back run the fastest 40 I've ever seen out of my office, and he said, "Leigh, I'm my own charity." So we try to profile, look for young athletes who are bright, have high character, have shown an interest in being a role model, and I try to make sure that I'm only talking to athletes that I think would be interested in that. You know, you have in the various sports so many agents. In football, it's almost 1,000 certified agents. And so I learned early that if I was talking to somebody who was ambitious for second career, who wanted to make a difference in the world, that also tended to be the type of athlete who would succeed on the football or baseball field or the basketball court. So by trying to profile, we're able to turn out a Patrick Mahomes who comes from a strong family, was raised with good values. Even with all the fame and notoriety he has, he's still very grounded and making, through his Mahomes 15 and the Mahomes Foundation, a real difference in kids' lives.
That's just a remarkable, incredible thing. I mean, the country really does appreciate the fact that that's what you focus on. And I know your hometown of Culver City, California, loves the fact that you are who you are and is very proud that you come from there.
Well, it really was a great city to grow up in. They did things I feel like current youth don't get to do, like you'd walk out of your house on a Saturday morning, play all day until your mother called you home to dinner, and you had to use your imagination. And the funniest thing is that MGM was right there,
Right.
and we used to jump the fence and play on the sound stages. So it could be a Western set, or it could be Old Mexico, or it could be a South Sea island.
Right.
And they would have these big backdrops behind them, but they'd have the fronts of all the buildings. So we played. Fortunately, we never got caught. But right behind our house, they condemned all of the homes for several blocks and put a bunch of construction into there. And we used to play out on that lot. So they built very slowly this big mound behind our house, and we played on that. And that mound was then concreted over, and it became the 405 freeway.
Oh my gosh, I remember when that was built, because as a child we would sneak over to MGM and play back there too. Just
Yes.
Great memories, great memories. Then you got involved in movies, and everybody knows about Jerry Maguire and how that went. How fun was that for you?
It was fun because Cameron Crowe, the writer-director, is so gifted, and he started following me to try to pick up atmosphere for movies that would involve a sports agent. So he came to the NFL draft in 1993, where I had Drew Bledsoe as the first pick, and he watched what went on. He came to the league meetings, and that's actually where Tim McDonald, who was a strong safety, said that famous line. And he came to Pro Scouting Day at USC and a series of games and Super Bowl party. And I told him stories, lots of stories. The fun part then was sort of taking a look at the script to try to make sure that it didn't break the willing suspension of disbelief that's necessary to hold you in a motion picture. And that things looked accurate. That if you're a sports fan, you know that the field doesn't look that way, or does look that way. And at any rate, and then I took Cuba Gooding Jr. with me down to the Super Bowl that year and made him pretend he was a wide receiver for a week.
And it must have worked. It got him that Academy Award.
Well, yes, he was wonderful and really quite a interesting character.
That was a fun movie, fun to watch, and again, as you people who, when you buy his book, you're going to really like it. Leigh was able, as a little child, to be his grandfather ran a business, and he was around a lot of famous celebrities for a long time, some of the best in the business. That had to be a thrill.
So, Los Angeles Country Club in Los Angeles would not allow blacks, Asians, Jews, Latinos, or actors. And so my grandfather helped open Hillcrest Country Club, and that became the hangout of all sorts of famous movie stars. Well, he played gin rummy every morning, and if you're younger, you probably won't remember these figures, but you can look them up, with Groucho Marx, George Burns, George Jessel, Danny Kaye, and so I would sit on his lap, and George Burns, who later played God, took me to my first baseball game with my grandpa, and it was sort of special. I had an autographed Elvis Presley guitar. I have a picture of me sitting on Marilyn Monroe's lap. So it probably was the genesis that said later I'd have some participation in entertainment.
Yeah, that you did, and that had to be a lot of fun. And I'm sure Marilyn Monroe, until the day she died, was thrilled to be able to say that she had you on her lap.
Oh yes, there was some very little kid who she quickly forgot. But so that was all interesting. But I had a father who went the other way, and instead of inheriting the restaurant fortune, he ended up going into education. So he ended up being a principal in the LA City schools for his whole career. So I had the balance of both of those influences.
Yeah, that's right. And your mom was a teacher, wasn't she?
My dad was a teacher, then a vice principal, then a principal. He ended up at Fairfax High School in Los Angeles. My mother was the first audio-visual librarian.
Oh, that's right.
So it was back in the day when you went to the library to get a book. So what happened was that she introduced film into a library to make it a place where you could go. And it started out with the actual big reels of film. And then as things evolved into VHS and then later DVD, she pioneered the whole concept of going to a library and checking out something other than a book.
That's amazing. I mean, good for her to have that foresight and see those kind of things. That's really amazing. Nowadays, with football getting underway, is there any players that you're involved with right now who we should be looking for this coming season?
We did a draft pick named David Sills from West Virginia, who I think is going to break out really quickly with the Buffalo Bills. One of the rookies we did last year, Ronald Jones, a running back, I predict will have a big year. We have we have three running backs for Green Bay, but keep your eye on Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams because they'll do well. I think that Patrick is even going to have a better year. It may not play out that way statistically because it's awful hard to throw 50 touchdown passes in a season. But the scary thing about it is he learned last year. And so mistakes he made, he won't make again. And he learned how to read the field. So that'll be interesting. We're working on a new VR project where you put the helmet on and you become a player. And you see the defensive players rushing towards you. And you have a ball in your hand. Based on what you do with the ball, the defenses change, you can get picked off, you hear crowd noise, you see the guys coming towards you, so I think that'll be fun. We're still working on concussion issues to try to raise awareness and find a helmet that does more than protect against skull fracture, and then find nutraceuticals and pharmaceuticals. And we're also offering an interesting education package. So, Joe, I want to mentor the next generation of sports professionals. So we do a sports career conference where for an hour you sit and there are television anchor people and print journalists, and you can ask them how they got into business. And then you switch to marketers or people who run teams or leagues or conferences. You learn how to you learn from negotiators, and then we do a agent academy that has been, and the next one in Washington D.C. on July 20th, and there we actually get the young people up and business school, law school, sports marketing, undergrads, and people just trying to find what they think might be a more exciting career. And so there we have them actually try to recruit a real player we brought in as a client. So they learn recruiting skills. They learn how to negotiate. So we have half of them play general managers and half of them play agents for a first-round draft pick, and they have to actually do the negotiation. And they learn how to brand and market, so they have to put together a marketing plan. So that's sort of fun. And then we have an online course, which is 85 modules, every field of sports that you potentially could want as a career, and it's online, and then you get a certificate at the end. So we have a few projects going.
What a great concept. And those of you listening out there need to understand that a lot of the NFL's focus over the last several years to make helmets safer and players safer, to eliminate concussions, is all because of Mr. Steinberg. Leigh has taken the lead and is a huge advocate in making the sport safer and better for everybody. And we have to commend you on that, because everybody needs to be safe. And in a sport like that is so violent, if you will, that's a very important thing. And you have really tried to make a difference in all of their lives.
Well, we started back in 1994 because in the late 80s I had a crisis of conscience because I kept seeing quarterbacks, the players go down, and doctors couldn't tell us how many were too many. So we got the leading neurologists from across the country, and now I've held 14 concussion conferences. And the science keeps getting better because the brain is the last frontier of research. But it's trying to establish a baseline for so that someone takes a test before they go on the field, and then they can judge by how they react after the concussion. It's taking blocking and tackling with the head out of the game. It's finding ways to have less contact. The Ivy League this year is not allowing any hitting except in games. I mean, basically, you don't hit in training camp and you don't hit during practice.
Wow.
And you still can play effective football. There are nutraceuticals and pharmaceuticals that are starting to really prophylactically protect the brain against getting hurt or then once it happens. And, of course, it's not just a pro football issue. It's a college and high school football issue.
Right.
It's a hockey issue, field hockey, even young girls who play AYSO soccer get concussed. There's actually a study I saw that showed lower test scores if a young person is hitting the ball. So there's a lot of awareness to happen here.
Wow, I mean, that's a good thing. So the new rules, where I know you've been a football and baseball fan your whole life, but in football, where the rules have changed so much, where the quarterbacks are really protected, where you can't hit them, you can't do a lot of things that you used to be able to do, and you'll hear people argue
you're right.
that.
And here's the funny thing. People always say, what are you trying to do, put a dress on the quarterback, or
Right.
sissified football? But the reality is that these changes have all occurred, and last season football dominated America at the NFL level and at the collegiate level. And it's not only the most popular sport by 2-1, it's the most popular television show. There are many weeks in which the top 10 Nielsen-rated nighttime shows are half of them are pro football, and so it's the most. It is the entertainment choice first for most Americans, and yet they put all those changes in, so it's obviously not something that's impairing people's their enhancement of enjoyment of the games.
Well, and that's for sure. And you know, even though baseball still calls itself the national pastime, I think over the last decade or so, football has become the national pastime.
And when you and I grew up, it was baseball.
Right.
And baseball dominated America, and the NBA, obviously. So I've done, at our height, we had 60 baseball players. We had about 12 basketball players. And then I represented the U.S. soccer team in the World Cup back in 1994. and also did boxing with Oscar De La Hoya and Lennox Lewis,
Right.
and Olympians like Brian Boitano and Kerry Strug. So all sports are interesting.
They really are. But football, I think, as you said, I think it's just dominating America nowadays. You know, you see more football
It
jerseys on
really,
kids than you do
yeah, it
baseball
was,
jerseys.
hello?
Yeah, go on.
It was a game that developed while television developed, and so it perfectly fits all the breakthrough camera angles, the wiring a player for sound. It's an event, so it happens once a week, and you have the anticipation of the next game and the analysis of the game the week before. It's got contact, and so it fits the taste of America right now.
Boy, it really does. It really does. I mean, it's just come a long way in a short time and has become the dominant sport, I think, in America today. Um, I know you still like baseball. What do you think some of those races going on in baseball this season so far?
Well, first of all, I am a diehard Dodger fan.
I
When they
know,
came
love it.
to Los Angeles in 1958, we all the kids listened to Vin Scully on their transistor radios, and we fell in love with the Dodgers. And they actually did a unique concept. They marketed Los Angeles like it was Des Moines, Iowa. So they had straight A nights, and they had Little League nights and Kiwanis nights. And then they created the concept of going to the game. Didn't matter who was pitching, didn't matter who they were playing, you got to go to the Dodger game. And they did novel marketing, and they had Vin Scully's voice. So I couldn't be more thrilled to have them be as successful as they are this year. Their depth is so great that they can plug and play a whole variety of players, and they've been able to bring up through their farm system, the Cody Bellingers and Corey Seagers of the world, and then a whole new group comes along, and you see Alex Verdugo playing, and they've got Beatty, and this last weekend they won 3 straight games with walk-on home runs.
And that's never happened before.
You got to post up against Houston, which is sensational, and Boston was really sensational last year, and so they're up against it tough. And the Yankees have come on this year, so they're up against it tough because there's a lot of superb teams in the American League.
They really
and
are.
I love the Angels also.
And I kind of miss not having Mike Scioscia with them, you know.
I understand, but with Trout and Ohtani, I mean, they've got 2 of the biggest stars in the game, and then you're watching Albert Pujols make history with every game.
Almost,
and
yeah.
So that's exciting too. I went to a game at Candlestick. They're not playing very well this year, but talk about an atmosphere. Oh my goodness, it is so much fun. People love that Pac Bell Park, and it was a raucous crowd the night I was there.
That is fun. That is a great park. But I used to love, even in the summer, going to Candlestick and freezing to death to watch a game.
So I grew up with a father that rooted for the Brooklyn Dodgers, so I was brought up, no offense to anyone, being a Yankee hater, and but they're good. They're really good again, and so Boston, Houston, the Yankees are all in the way of the Dodgers.
You know, can you count how many nights you went to bed with your what was called at the time a transistor radio, listening to Vin Scully call the game?
So again, for the younger listeners, you have to imagine a time where there's no internet, where there are no cell phones, where there are 3 major television channels and a couple independents, where if you went to a movie, if you didn't see it on a screen, there was only a minor number that appeared. So the fact that you could actually listen to the mellifluous tones of Vince Scully was great. And you'd have to, your parents would tell you to go to bed, and so you would have to hide that transistor radio under your pillow and make sure the sound was down when they came in to check on you.
And I think we all did that every night, and it was well worth it every night. Back then when you started going, you like you said, it didn't matter who was pitching. Well, it didn't, because you were either going to see Koufax or Drysdale.
So you had the best pitching in baseball. Sandy Koufax was by far the best pitcher, but you also had Maury Wills stealing 100 bases.
Exactly.
And Big Frank Howard and Tommy Davis and Willie Davis, and they really were a great team. In the second year they come to Southern California, in 1959, they win the World Series.
Right.
So all of a sudden, you got this great team, and then they come back like in '63 and '65, and they win again. So they really solidified their hold on their fan base.
They did, and you mentioned their minor league system. They just had so many rookies of the year over the course of history, and at one time, the five in a row. You're
right. It's uncanny how many rookies of the year they have. And then all of a sudden, you look at the next generation, and the catcher, Will Smith, hit a walk-off homer last night, so they've got him coming. And Alex Verdugo looks like a big star. And then out of nowhere, they reclaim veterans like Max Muncy, who also is a big star. So
right.
They're just fun to watch.
They are fun to watch. They have that comfortable lead in the West, and 2 years in a row they've been to the World Series. It looks like it again this year, and maybe this will be the year.
We don't want to end up like the Buffalo Bills.
No, we don't.
The Buffalo Bills.
Poor Jim Kelly.
Unfairly have gone down in history as losers, when in reality, and I had Bruce Smith and Thurman Thomas,
right.
When reality, to be among the two best teams in football for 4 straight years is amazing and incredible.
It is. I never understood that, what other team wouldn't want to be able to say that they were in the Super Bowl 4 years in a row? Anyone would have wanted to say that, yet they got labeled as losers. That, to this day, that astounds me.
Exactly.
Just a crazy thing. But have you?
Some great fans.
Yeah, that's for sure. Great fans. We talked a little bit about Jerry Maguire. Are there any other movies that you were involved in that you had fun with?
So after Jerry Maguire, I was approached by the director Oliver Stone to be a technical advisor and work on Any Given Sunday. And that was a film that originally had a rapper. It was a rapper that they originally had playing the role of the quarterback, but he couldn't throw the ball. And so they had to fire him, and it gave a young comedic actor his first dramatic role, and that was Jamie Foxx.
Wow.
And so that was fun to work on. And I spent a night with Al Pacino, putting him in role, and Cameron Diaz, and was there on the set, and that worked well. And then I did a film called For the Love of the Game, which was a baseball film,
right,
which had Kevin Costner as a pitcher, and he actually pitched. I mean, they didn't use a double for him because he used to be a baseball player. And that one was fun. And now we've got a number of different people working on projects that make either a movie or a television show out of my book, The Agent. So we'll see what develops there.
Outstanding. And ladies and gentlemen, he mentioned the book. Let me hold it up here again. Leigh Steinberg, The Agent. my 40-year career making deals and changing the game, and I'm sure it's all available on Amazon. Please go there. You will love every chapter, every word. It's just a fantastic book about a fantastic man. Leigh, I want to really thank you for taking the time to be with us this evening. I want to thank you for living 3 blocks away off of Culver Boulevard in Culver City and going to Stoner Avenue School and being involved with Avnet. My mom worked there.
You know, it's the funniest thing that you say that, because my father was working 3 jobs, and we lived in a tiny little house, 5 of us using the same bathroom, and my 2 brothers and I in the same room. And my father invested in Avnet, and it went from like 9 to like 60, and that enabled us to buy a new house in a neighborhood not that far away,
Right.
but but we had much more room, all thanks to Avnet.
That's funny. That's funny. But yeah, just it's great to have those in common with you. It's always good. We haven't had you on the air since 2015. It's always great to stay in touch with you. I want to thank you very, very much for taking your time today, and we really appreciate all that you have done, especially having your clients donate all that money and what you do for the community. Thank you very much.
It's been my pleasure.
We appreciate it. You have a great evening. Something that they're willing to do, that's just a great thing. Ron, what do you think about that?
He's another one of a long line of guests that have been on the show that have really believe in giving back, and that seems to be the recurring theme all throughout. So if any of those folks at home watching along, I'm sure they're picking up on that, is how these guys all want to give back and do.
And I think that's the kind of guests we look for. We also feel that giving back to the community is an important thing. And again, Leigh Steinberg, just what a great guy. And the fact that he cares about football enough to work that hard on getting concussions eliminated and just so many things. Again, our thanks to the great Leigh Steinberg. And please do yourself a favor. You can see the picture of his book on the screen. Please buy that book, The Agent. It's just a great, great book, and you'll really enjoy it. Now let's go to some emails that have been sent to us. This email, same fellow as last time, from Mr. David Nettles. Thank you, David. He has a couple questions. In this day and age where we are constantly hearing about record-breaking salary contracts on an almost yearly basis, do you see this getting to the point where team ownerships are going to say enough is enough and we have to slow this down and get this under control? And then he goes on to say, also, it appears to me that players with subpar stats are even getting massive contracts and that it makes very little sense to him. Well, let's talk a little bit about that. Salaries are going up every year. As you said, we saw more record-breaking salaries this season with both Bryce Harper and Manny Machado. And he asked, do we think it'll ever calm down and get under control? No, I don't. I mean, we had a point at one time where they had the players come in while the other players were on strike, and it looked like that was the way it was going to go. It came down to a few days before opening day, and then Major League Baseball gave in to the players and continued doing what they're doing. So I don't think that's ever going to change. I think the players will continue making that kind of salary year after year after year. Hopefully they'll have agents such as Leigh Steinberg who will get them to give back to the community, who will get them to have some kind of loyalty to the team that they're on, which is a very unique thing for agents to do. And then when he talks about the subpar talent still making a lot of money, and that's very true, but you also have to agree that baseball is probably the hardest sport to play. You know, the goal is to hit a round ball with a round bat squarely, and in just a split second decide whether it's a fastball, a curveball, high, low, inside, outside, all of those, and then crush it with the bat. I mean, it's just a tough, tough game. So even though they may be the 23rd, 24th, and 25th player on the team, they're very, very talented. And, you know, look how many youngsters play Little League, T-ball, Little League, and on up that don't make it. I mean, they are an elite group. Do they deserve the money that they're making? Maybe not. But they deserve to be paid for what they do in respect to the other players because they are the best at what they do. So will it ever change, David? I don't think so. But thank you very much for the question. Now, last week's trivia question was who was the first major league pitcher to pitch a ball over 100 miles per hour? And our caller, Mr. Yankee, Pat Ruggiero, had that answer. It was Nolan Ryan, who did it on September 7th, 1974, when he was an Angel against the Chicago White Sox. Nolan Ryan was the first major league pitcher to throw a ball over 100 miles per hour.
That's back when he was throwing the Ryan Express.
Boy, he was something. He was the guy, and we've talked earlier about him, where you didn't want to dig in as a batter because you never knew where that ball was going, but he could throw it hard. He could really bring it. This week's trivia question. We talk about the Miami Marlins and the MIA and the fact that, you know, they're trailing their division, the American League West. I'm sorry, they're trailing the National League East. The question is, who is the Marlins' all-time leader in Grand Slams? This week's question, who is the Marlins' all-time leader in Grand Slams? And again, please, no cheating, no internet, no Google. If you know, write to us at myinsidepitch@gmail.com. No spaces, myinsidepitch@gmail.com. And we will give you that answer next week. Brian?
I'm just sitting over smiling like the village idiot. It's what I do.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening. Again, please, this book, if I can find it, The Agent, my 40-year career making deals and changing the game. You can find it on Amazon, I'm sure. Do yourself a favor. It really is a great book. Again, our thanks to the great super agent, Mr. Leigh Steinberg, for contributing to our show. Thank you all for listening, and have a great evening.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And thank you, Leigh. And we look forward to talking to you folks or with you folks next week. Same bat station, same bat time.
There you go. Have a great one, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for listening.
Bye, everybody. Look, we actually have sponsors. We feel so special. Thank you, sponsors.